Hello, I'm Cass. Welcome to this month's wrap up. Now, I managed to read about 7 books in January, which is lower than usual. However, a lot of these books that I read were a little bit longer, and I kind of hit a bit of a reading slump going into the new year, which was a little bit unfortunate, but I'm still pretty happy with the books that I managed to read. However, if you asked past me to guess what books that she would be reading in January, these are not the books that I would expect whatsoever, but without further ado, let's jump right into it. First, we're going to discuss Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Now, this book I gave 4.5 stars. I really thought it was going to be my first 5-star read of the year, but unfortunately that was not the case. However, that doesn't mean I didn't still really enjoy this book. I think the magic system is very unique, and it's based off of Arthurian legend, which I think is fascinating. However, I feel like Tracy Deonn really underestimated the reader's abilities and knowledge of Arthurian legends, because I feel like some things were a little bit glazed over, a bit too glazed over to fully grasp the magic system, unless you have prior knowledge of the Arthurian legend and the Knights of the Round Table. I will say the strongest point of Tracy Deonn's writing, in my opinion, is her ability to create very authentic and realistic characters. Every single character in this book felt like it could be a real person that I possibly could know, and no characters were really left as like an empty shell just to be like used as a character to move the plot forward, if that makes sense. Everyone had their own very unique personalities, and I love that Tracy Deonn discussed how she kind of imbued Bree with some of her own experiences, and I think that's what really made this book feel so authentic, especially regarding Bree, our main character. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I will be picking up the second book, Bloodmarked, very soon, hopefully. I always say very soon, but then like months pass and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I wanted to read that. But all in all, a very solid read. I would definitely recommend it. It is simply fantastic for a debut novel. It's very impressive. And yeah, I gave it a 4.5. Next, I want to discuss Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare, and oh, my bookmark is left in here. Oh, would you look at that? I gave this book a 5 stars, which might have been like a little bit too generous. However, I was just very excited to get wrapped back into Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter universe. It's literally my favorite thing, and Cassandra Clare literally just knows how to run off my nostalgia for City of Bones, and I really enjoyed this book. I think what I was talking about with being a little bit too generous is the beginning is simply so slow, and the amount of characters that are introduced, it's really like you either have to like write down which character is whose kid and which character is who, or just like plow ahead and hope you remember eventually, which is my method. I just kept reading and getting characters mixed up until I finally have them mostly separated in my head about like who's what kid, whatever. That's like my only major critique about this book, is just the slow start. I was actually very worried because I started reading this and 100 pages in, I was bored. And I'm like, Cassandra Clare, don't let me down like this. However, once we got into the thick of the plot and the action, I enjoyed it so much once the actual like demon hunting started happening, and the plot and like the cliffhanger at the end leaves me very intrigued for Chain of Iron, and I've heard shit goes down in the second book, and I just cannot wait. I know Chain of Thorns is now out, so I can read that very soon whenever I figure out how I'm gonna buy it. But yeah, Chain of Gold, 5 out of 5 stars. I'm so excited to read the rest of the Last Hours trilogy, and I'm just obsessed with the Shadowhunter universe. I hope she never stops writing books based in the Shadowhunter universe, but I think eventually she might become bored and move on. I just am not ready for that moment to happen. We're gonna kind of move down in terms of like my star ratings. So those last 2 were pretty high rating, and this is actually my lowest rating book of this month, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I gave it a 2.5 and was severely disappointed in this book. I actually picked this up because I really need to read Babel for my Patreon book club, and I just wasn't really in the mood. And it's kind of a thick and intimidating book. So I was like, what if I picked up like a kind of shorter book that's also dark academia to kind of get me in the mood for reading this dark academia book? And then I read this and I gave it a 2.5. So not exactly the strategy I thought would play out, but let's discuss this book. Now, I think my main problem with this book was just how incredibly messy everything was. The plot progression was all over the place, and we were supposed to care about characters that we never really got a glimpse of. The whole murder mystery plot I thought was just going to be like a start to the book, but it ended up spreading throughout the entirety of the book. The plot twists were not necessarily obvious, but they were so obviously wrong in guessing who, like, the perpetrator was, that you could really think and deduce, for the most part, who it kind of was. I think the way that these, like, secret societies worked were just so confusing. The magic really made no sense, and I really didn't enjoy our main character's perspective. I know she's not necessarily the best main character in terms of, like, her actions, but I think you're supposed to sympathize with her because of her upbringing. But I just couldn't find myself able to sympathize with her because she just felt like such a bland character. And comparing it to, like, Tracy Deon's character, where every single character felt so authentic, it was like the very opposite in Leigh Bardugo's book, which is so weird because Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone are just phenomenal novels. But I don't know what happened with her adult debut novel, but it just did not hit. I also think that she was trying to dive into exploring, like, way too many topics and never really tackled any of them. They were just kind of brought up as a plot point, but then nothing was ever, like, resolved or, like, discussed about them. I will say check the trigger warnings if you do want to read this book. I wouldn't really recommend it. I'm not planning on reading Hellbent. My roommate probably is, and I'll just ask her what happens and if she likes it or not. The last 100 pages or so is the only point in the book where it finally got good, and this is a 400-page book. So I'm really curious on why, like, the other 300 pages couldn't have just started out like that. And it also starts extremely slow. I would have typically DNF'd this book 50 pages in, but I have a video and I will explain in that video why I continued reading it. But yeah, I was severely disappointed with Ninth House. Not what I was looking for. Next, I want to discuss The Toll by Neil Shusterman. This was the finale, the third book in the Scythe series, or Arc of the Scythe series, and I was absolutely entranced this entire book to the point where I sat down to just read in this chair, actually, and then ended up reading the entire book in, like, one sitting. It was a book that I didn't want to put down, but I also am unsure how I feel about how the book ended as well. I think the romance aspect in this series was a little bit unnecessary. I wish instead of romance they focused more on, like, a friendship bond between the two main characters, but it makes sense on what they did. This book, though, was, like, all over the place in the best sort of way. Outlandish things kept happening, and I was kind of here for it. I can't really discuss it too in depth because, like I said, it's the third book in the series, and it's the finale, so it's not like I can be like, and I really like this moment that happened, because I don't want to, like, spoil anything. I think this book was probably, because Scythe was really the strongest book. Thunderhead kind of, like, slowed down, but I understand now why Thunderhead was a little bit slower and why it was setting up so many plot points. And that was another thing. There were so many different, like, plot lines and characters we were kind of following, and when they all kind of, like, intermix at the end, it kind of made sense as to why, but it was a fascinating read. I definitely do recommend it. I don't typically read this sort of genre, but I was definitely fascinated by it, and yeah, I give it a solid 4 stars. The Stationery Shop was actually my Patreon book club for December. I just didn't end up reading it till the beginning of January because I procrastinate every single month, apparently. And I think I went into this book thinking it was something different. And I shouldn't have gone in with expectations. I did give it a 3.5, but similar to how the Ninth House kind of was, where it started very, very slow and then it picked up in the last 100 or so pages, that's kind of how this book felt. I think it was very beneficial to learn about certain situations because this book was actually inspired by true events between the US and Iran, and it is based off the events of the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat. I'm gonna pretend like I definitely pronounced that correctly and have the ability to pronounce words good. It was very beneficial for me to learn, like, that sort of history because it's something that the US and the UK kind of swept under the rug, and I really did enjoy our book club discussion over on Patreon during, like, our Zoom call. I think it was very, very fascinating to discuss that from different points of views, because we actually have people from the US and from the UK. So the kind of different points of views were very, very fascinating and very enlightening. It was a good read in terms of like education, but in terms of like plot and storyline, I really could have cared less. It was very forgettable in my opinion. I thought that this was gonna hit me differently and it just didn't. I was a little disappointed. Very slow. Not my favorite, and I give it a 3.5. Moving on to my actual first 5-star read of the year, and that was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, everyone knows about this book, okay? The owner of my restaurant has read this book, and I was just a little late to the game. I definitely cried during this book, and I definitely enjoyed this book. Now, I think it comes almost from like the innate human want and desire of like drama. I don't know what it is about drama, but it really captivates a lot of people. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to start drama. I'm not trying to be involved in drama, but watching drama from a distance is entertaining. Like, plain and simple. We've created whole like TV shows and franchises based off of drama. And so, obviously, people enjoy the drama, and this was just a roller coaster, let me tell you what. Now, the main critiques of this book is Evelyn and her actual like love of her life, love interest, didn't actually have like a great relationship. And to that I'm like, yeah, I love how flawed every single character was and how all the decisions they were making were so fucked up. It really just, if you actually like sit back and look at the perspectives of each character, it's just fascinating to see how their environment kind of shaped them and why they make the choices they make and why they are so fucked up but don't realize that they're so fucked up. And I think it really reflects the Hollywood elites in reality, in real life, and how I think it will continue to be for a very long time, and it's really fueled by social media these days as well. It's just a fascinating read. I cried my eyes out. And yeah, I just put off reading this way too long. Taylor Jenkins Reid definitely has a way with kind of sucking you into her stories. And I will say it does start a little bit slow until Evelyn starts actually telling her story. But fascinating, so good, 5 out of 5 stars. You've probably heard so many positive reviews about this book, and I'm just adding to the pool, I'm gonna be honest. As for my last book, it was a reread, and it was for the Wyverns and Words book club, and that is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I actually annotated my copy this time, which was so exciting because I love The Name of the Wind. I have a tattoo for The Name of the Wind. I am obsessed with this book, and it was a very fun time. 5 stars, obviously. Like I said, it was a reread. And the fact that I actually annotated it makes me very happy because now I can like flip back through the tabs and read certain moments that I really enjoyed. And I will say, the amount of humor in this book that matches my own personal humor is so good. I was talking during the live show discussion about how funny I thought this book was in terms of like the dialogue and the situations that happen. And Katie's like, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't classify it as a funny book though. And I'm like, I know you're right, but for some reason, the humor and like the subtle sarcasm and wittiness and the banter just aligned to what I liked perfectly, to the point where the majority of my tabs are yellow, which is things I found funny. And essentially we have Kvothe telling his life story to a character called the Chronicler, explaining how his life kind of turned out the way it did and how he found himself where he's at. It's just a fascinating method of storytelling, and Patrick Rothfuss's prose are just stunning. They are simply spectacular, like right from the start of the book. Now, I absolutely love the fact that I got like a bunch of people to read The Name of the Wind because it's definitely an incomplete series and has been an incomplete series for 11 years, but you know, semantics. I enjoyed it so much. So here are the 7 books, I mean plus the toll, which I had to return to the library, that I read in January. And I also kind of wanted to do like a little bonus ending to this video to try to like experiment how y'all receive this. I wanted to do like a little like life wrap up kind of update and give y'all the opportunity to also let me know like the highlights of your month in the comment. So certain events that might have happened, things that you were grateful for, music you've been listening to. So let me start with music and then I'll go into like life things and then I will let you go. Some specific songs lately that have just been looping in my head is Ditto by New Jeans, OMG by New Jeans, Beautiful Liar by Monsta X, Sugar Rush Ride by TXT, and Devil by the Window by TXT. They're so good. And then as for fun like life things I did this month, obviously like the most obvious thing, The elephant in the room is my hair. It looks like this now. I wanted to do something like a little different, and I've actually been working towards this split dye for quite a few months, but it just took some time to slowly lighten my hair where it wouldn't just be bleached and absolutely ruined. So that was something really fun. I also got to see one of my favorite K-pop groups, ONEUS, in concert, and I got to meet them. I did high touch, I got a group photo with them, and when that group photo comes out, I will be posting that all over social media, and I apologize for the person that I become when I post that photo. They are one of my favorite groups in terms of like their choreography and their songs and their stage presence, and it was so fun to be able to see them twice. But that is my little wrap up. Let me know either like your favorite books, some highlights of your month, things that you're grateful for. I'd really love to hear them. Just share whatever you feel like sharing. Thank you so much to my lovely Patreons for supporting the channel. Y'all support literally means the world to me. I could not dedicate as much time to YouTube as I do if not for y'all's support. And I really hope to see y'all in the next one. Toodles!